Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Rod.
I'm David.
And this is our story,
His glory.
We are Fresh Start Christian Sober Living. And David, we have a guest today.
Yes, today we have a special guest, actually. Her name's Nicole. She's going to tell you all about her story in regards to, how she got involved in addiction to alcohol and how God has saved her life and turned it around for the better. So without further ado, welcome Nicole to the show.
Thank you, David. I'm truly honored to be here today with you guys. In fact, I think it's an absolute miracle that I'm here today. And for anybody out there that's listening to this, no matter what kind of situation that you're in right now, you can also be a miracle. And I am living proof of that because, the trajectory that I was on, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. And I'm truly blessed now. So, I could go all the way back because I think my journey really started at a very, very young age. I'm going to touch lightly on that because I really want to get to the good part. And that's when God truly, God's always been there, but it was that moment when I truly allowed him into my life to really do a real work in me. And so, I grew up here in Texas, but down south, Houston, not a Cowboys fan, definitely a Texans fan. My parents were really successful. My mom was in the medical industry. My father was a CPA, was a partner in a firm. And, on all appearances, life was great. But pretty much my entire childhood, my father was an extremely hard drug addict and alcoholic. And unfortunately, what I got to witness was alcohol and drugs completely destroy his life. Here's a man that was just wildly successful. And basically, on the day that he died, he was homeless, living in, for lack of better terms, a crack house with nothing on him. In fact, the only thing that I have of his today is one of those like prepaid credit cards that you can get at like Walmart. It was the only thing that was on his person when they found him. So I knew from an early age how devastating that drugs and alcohol would be. And in fact, I always told people, I'm never going to do that. I can see firsthand what it did. It destroyed my family. It destroyed me. It destroyed my sister. I am grateful that my sister was shielded from a lot of it because what came out of that was a lot of trauma. My mom had to travel. She was the only one that was working. My sister was always with a best friend. And so it just left me. And there's a lot of ramifications from that unfortunately carried down through my life. I wanted to be the person that fixed everything. I wanted to be the savior. I wanted to make sure that my dad was safe and I wouldn't even sleep at night because I wanted to make sure that he was safe. But being in that situation as a child and as a girl, I was put in some really compromising situations and, things that I went through as a woman that, nobody should ever have to go through. But because of the decisions that my father had made and where drugs and alcohol had taken him down, I was put in situations that were really unfortunate. And I carried a lot of that for a lot of years. In fact, it weighed me down. And there's other things that happened on later in life that just kind of compounded on top of it. But really my journey through addiction really started that young because before I had even drank anything or tried anything, I was already a very, very broken person. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful that throughout all of that, my grandparents became my parents of sorts. They lived in South Florida, so it wasn't a day-to-day thing, but they more than made up for what my father lacked in. And one of the things that they did was they got us involved in church very, very young. Like church was a non-negotiable. And so every single Sunday, I'm in church. Whether dad's home passed out or he's passed out in the pew next to me, we were in church. And so I had a very strong foundation growing up. So whether or not I was on the path that Christ had destined for me was irrelevant. But I did know who he was through everything. And I knew that in times of trouble that I did have some. And I'm grateful for that because not everybody I talk to has that.
That's right.
That's awesome. And so, moving into, young adulthood, I'm a very social person. I love to talk to people. I love to get to know people. Like I genuinely love people. I do like to fix people too, as I was alluding to previously. So I always have a real big circle of friends and I like to go out and have a good time. But part of going out and having a good time came with alcohol with me, unfortunately. I was one of those people that if we could have fun not drinking, we could really have fun while we were drinking.
Right.
You know, I just happened to be one of those kids in high school that when everybody else drank a couple and got really tired or started throwing up, that's when I was just getting started. In fact, you know, I would be the one with the rest of the, you know, blossoming alcoholics drinking all the liquor that was left over from the night. And so I always knew that I drank alcoholically from a very, very young age. And I just thought I was having fun. My life was so crappy back home and I was dealing with so much that when I could step out and do something that would make me not think about all of those things, I held on for dear life. You know, I was a 4.0 student in high school. I did amazing in high school. You know, I could go to any college I wanted when I came out of high school, but drinking and experimenting in drugs was part of my entire high school journey. So I did go to college right out the door. I went to A&M here in Texas. And you know what that did for me? I was now in my own apartment, and now I didn't have anybody that was kind of checking in on me. Not that I had super active parents before that, right? Because my dad was off in active addiction. My mom was working all the time. And so now I'm alone and I'm in a city, and now I have just a ton of other people I can meet and party with, which I did. So, you know, as the story for many of us, I did not last in college very long because I wouldn't wake up and I wouldn't go to school. And so I allowed drinking to take that away from me. And, you know, I hated it at the time, but I knew that there was no sense in me continuing to rack up student loan debt, which I did do, and literally about to pay them off, like in a few months now. So excited.
Praise God.
Literally, praise God. And so I came back home. And so I'm defeated, right? I know I have a drinking problem, and I'm still early 20s. I just turned 21, and I already have a drinking problem. And I remember even telling myself, well, Nicole, like, you're just young. You're just having a good time, right? But if you start drinking at lunch, then you have a problem. And then I started drinking at lunch. Well, you know, if you drink after you go home from the bar, well, then you're really an alcoholic. Or if you even have liquor in your house and you're drinking by yourself, then you have a problem. And so I'm meeting all of these qualifications, but I'm still giving the justification that I'm just a kid and I'm just having fun. And, you know, there was a moment, I was 24 years old, about to be 25, and I had gone out the night before and didn't get home probably until about 3 or 4 in the morning, got in bed, had to go to the bathroom, and literally could not walk to the restroom. I couldn't walk. And I crawled. I was literally like army crawling to the bathroom. And I just, in that moment, I was like, God, I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Like, you've given me so many gifts, right? You know, I'm doing well. I have a great job. You know, I'm so smart. I did so good in school. Like, what am I doing to myself? And I knew that I had to do something. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I am worth something. I don't have to do this anymore. And the very next day, because I had grown up with a father that had been to treatment 20 plus times, I was fortunate to know that a program like Alcoholics Anonymous existed out there. And there's so many 12-step based recovery programs out there for any kind of struggle that any of you guys are having. And, you know, it's easy to go on the internet and search these days, and they all really have the same core tenets at the end of the day, that through God and through Christ, any of this can be accomplished. And so I knew where to go. And the very next day I went to AA, and it was great. You know, I went through this and they're like, yeah, you know, it's a spiritual program. You believe in God. Obviously, I believe in God. I've grown up in church my whole life. Okay, do you have a problem? Yeah, definitely have a problem. Okay, well, then we have a solution for you. And instead of really digging into the solution, and at the end of the day, what the solution was is that you have to be willing to turn everything over.
That's right.
I mean, but I know that, right? The word tells us that God, you know, our burden is heavy, but his yoke is light, right?
Cast our burdens upon him. He cares for us.
Yeah, I know that. I grew up knowing that. And in fact, when I was younger, things I couldn't control, like things that my dad was doing, God, just take this from me. Put me in a safe situation. I don't want to be here anymore. You know, to have that childlike faith going into adulthood, right? But then when we are forced to be on our own, right? Like, I was forced to be on my own so much, and I was forced to have to go through life where I was feeling alone, even though I knew God was always there. I tended to instead of turning to him, I would turn to see how I could solve the problem. And so when I get into AA and they're like, hey, you got to turn everything over. I'm like, well, I know how to do that. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And so what I did was I allowed, this 12-step program that I was a part of and the people that were sober around me, because now I have a real social outlet. Not only do I not have to drink, but now I have a social outlet with people that don't drink. So I can do this. I can be sober. And it was great. I was sober for 4 years. I went back to school, finished my degree, went to graduate school, got my master's, became, I work for a large public accounting firm. I have the job of my dreams. I'm moving up the ladder, and life is great. And, but I never put my reliance in God. I was still going to church through all of this, but I wasn't turning anything over. It was like lip service, and through all of this, I'm working with young teen girls talking about, how God can change your life. And if you really put all your trust in him, the things that can happen, right? And I never did it for myself. And it's just wild to me reflecting back on that. And so, 4 years I make it. No alcohol. Life's great. Life's completely turned around. I'm moving to Dallas. I'm with my fiance. We're going to get married. Everything is great. Everything that I had wanted from a young girl I had. And then one night, someone walked up to me and they said, hey, a bunch of us are going to share a bottle of champagne. Do you want to come? And I said, yes. It was that quick. All of that, all those 4 years of work that I said I had been doing about turning everything over vanished in a second. It was like I just walked in one day, nothing happened. I was in Chicago on business. It was freezing cold, but I was excited because there was snow all over the ground.
Right.
And somebody walks in, a complete stranger, we're going to share a bottle of champagne. And I said, sure. And that's all it was. Proceeded to share like 9 bottles of champagne that night, by the way, and wished I had died the next morning. But I truly wished I had died because what had I just done? So I came home and I lied about it. I never spoke a word of it. But, anybody who's been in active addiction or any sort of mental problem in reality, you don't get to hide it for very long.
That's right.
Because even if you believe that you're hiding it, the people that are closest to you see it all over you. And whether they can smell it on you, which my case, or they can just see it all over your face, your demeanor, your attitude, how you talk to people, how excited you are about life, it all changes. And so, I love when I hear stories of people that happens to, and they're like, you know what? I had my little fun moment there, or whatever we want to call it, but I'm going back. I can't do this again in my life. But that wasn't my journey. So what that looked like for me was 9 years of experimenting and convincing myself that I wasn't an alcoholic before, because I was young. How can you literally be an alcoholic at 24 years old? So now I'm 30 at this point, right? And that's when life really starts happening, at least in my experience. That's when the kids start coming, and that's when, buying a home starts happening, and buying cars and not being able to depend on, mom's credit card anymore, whatever your story is. I'm still have the great job, right? But now it's really stressful and it's really demanding, and I'm traveling all the time, and my drinking just continues to escalate. Still going to church, but you know what? To be honest with you guys, I took a step back from that too, because alcohol became my God. It controlled every aspect of my life. When I reflect back, how much energy and how much thought I put into drinking, it's mind-blowing, because it got to the point where I was a daily drinker, and I had to, make sure that it was always available, but that if it was 2 a.m. and I needed more, that I had it available. Or, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to go, to the grocery store, this many days per week. So I need to make sure, well, how many do I need? Well, how many do I normally drink every single day? Doing all this math to figure all this out. Or, okay, I'm taking the kids on vacation. Can I drink at the airport? What time do we need to get to the airport so I can drink before I get on the plane? It was mind-blowing how much energy I would put into it. I mean, it was down to the fact where my kids would want to go to McDonald's, and I said, Mom doesn't eat fast food, and I would take my kids to Chili's because Mom could drink at Chili's. And that brings up a really good point, and some probably probably one of the hardest things for me was that along with this starting up of drinking again, I carried a lot of guilt and shame with it, right? Because I knew that I could stop drinking. And I was so burdened with the shame of not being able to remain sober and see it get out of hand so quickly. I went into a extremely, extremely, extremely dark, deep depression about it. I constantly lived in guilt and shame. And by doing that to myself, I allowed the guilt and shame and trauma and embarrassment and everything that was outside of my control completely also consume me, because misery likes company, right? And if I give the devil an opportunity to dig me into a pit of depression, he's going to just bring everything along with it.
That's right.
And so not only was I at the darkest point in my life from a drinking perspective, but I was at the darkest point of my life just in life, period. I never wanted to have kids because I knew the type of childhood that I had, and I did not want to do that to a kid. I just didn't want to do it. And, but I was 30 and my clock was ticking, I suppose. And I decided, well, you know what? I'll stop drinking. I'm going to have a kid. I'm going to get pregnant and I'm just not going to drink anymore, because that's what I thought that I could do. And I wish that was the story that I'm about to tell you, but it's not. I couldn't stop drinking. And I lived in fear every single day of something happening to my baby, because I couldn't stop. But I didn't stop. Nothing could make me stop. Nothing. And in fact, I wish it stopped at baby number 1, because it didn't. It went through baby number 2 and baby number 3 too. I kept crying out to God, why would you choose me to be the mother to these children? Why would you trust me with your children? The word says that you sowed this child into me. God, why would you choose me to be that person? You know I can't stop. I can't stop. Why would you do this? I never enjoyed a pregnancy because I lived in fear. I lived in guilt. I lived in shame. If you knew that I was drinking every single day while I was pregnant, when I birthed this child, you're going to take him from me. You're going to take him from me. If my husband finds out what I'm doing, he's going to take these kids from me. There was nothing enjoyable about bringing children into the world, yet I kept doing it. If you watch my videos and pictures of when I was delivering, on the day I was delivering, you see fear all over me. I'm white as a ghost. And I don't regret that, right? It's not part of my story that I like to share, but I want to tell you why I share it. That guilt and shame that I walked around with, my oldest is now 9, for so many years, it was as if you took those chains that they attach in like one of those strongman competitions where they're about to pull this 18-wheeler manually, take those chains and just like start at the top and just they bound around me. Like I was so bound up in this. And then on top of those chains, attach like some 500-pound weights behind you. I couldn't even stand up tall. I couldn't even hold my head up high. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. And I know people like to say, I look in the mirror and I don't even know myself. I'm like, oh no, it was way farther than that. I couldn't even look at myself. I couldn't even physically look at myself in the eyes because I'm like, what have you done? Like, what have you done? What have you done, Nicole? And every single birth I had, the Lord gave me this perfect baby. And I was so undeserving. I was so undeserving of that. I didn't think that I could possibly be worthy of anything like that. But yet God kept showing me it over and over and over. I have 3 amazing little boys who are now 9, 7, and 6. I had 3 under 2 at one point in my life. I like to joke and tell people that's why I drank. No, I drank because I was an alcoholic. Yeah. But it was really, really, really hard. But you know what? My 9-year-old, he's an unbelievable athlete.
Wow.
My 7-year-old he was reading at 4 years old and is he comes to me and tries to give me investment advice because those are the videos that he watches on YouTube right now. And my baby is a boy after his mom's own heart because he sings and dances just like I do. And they are so amazing and they're so perfect and they're so precious. And so, I know why God gave me those miracles. But those chains that I was just talking about, I had a really, really great way of compartmentalizing things. And so when you got Nicole alone, or you got Nicole in prayer, or you got Nicole where no one else was looking, I was a shell of a human being. I did not want to be here. I contemplated ending my life more times than I'm even going to share on this, because the people that have been there know how that feeling feels. I had a plan. But if you knew that, you'd take my kids from me. So I couldn't let anybody know that. By the grace of God, I never did anything. I started having some health ramifications because you know what? If you don't eat and all you do is drink all day long and you don't sleep and you have a stressful job and you're not taking any care of yourself whatsoever, I'm 40 now. The body doesn't work like it used to. I couldn't even hold down food. There was a restaurant local to where I live, and they would see me every single day because they made a soup that my stomach could tolerate. And I was surviving on that and alcohol, essentially. And then I started having some feelings like going on up here, like, was I going to have a stroke, or like, am I having a seizure? Like, I'm talking about some really scary medical things were happening. And at this point, I just had ignored everybody that was saying, Nicole, you need to go to the hospital. Like, something's going on. And I was like, well, yeah, but what if they admit me overnight? Like, how am I going to drink? Oh, you know what? Maybe they'll give me a bunch of pain meds. Okay, well, if they only keep me for one day, I should be good for one day. But I never went to the hospital. And so we moved to Anna, and I get plugged into a really amazing church. Am I allowed to say that church's name?
Sure.
Yes.
So I attend Grace Point Family Church in Anna, Texas. It's a wonderful place. If you don't currently have a home church and you're in the area, I would definitely love to meet you. But I believe that's why God brought me to Anna. I know what brought me to Anna. I know why I live in Anna, but I know now why I was brought to Anna. Because God used this church in a mighty way. A very, very, very mighty way. I knew that because of my upbringing and how I went through childhood, that church had always been so important to me. When time was crazy, I would get to go to church camp. And when times were crazy, I go to Wednesday night and they would feed me. So, I want to also share that. Don't underestimate the value of providing a meal to a child. Those were some of my greatest memories in childhood.
Wow.
But I got plugged into this really amazing church, and I had never been part of a church family like that. Growing up in church, it was like, yeah, we knew people, but not like this. I mean, this was a family, and I like to say, oh, I'm in Texas alone. I don't have any family, it's just me and it's just us. And so my church family now gets mad at me because they say, you literally have family, by the way. So can you stop saying that? When I was sick, they rallied around. They were providing meals. If I'm about to just lose my mind because the kids are crazy, someone's coming over to help me with it. But this church and the building, and it wasn't even a church building, it was a school that we met in. The Holy Spirit was moving through that place, and I knew it from when I walked in, and I felt it, and I hadn't felt that in so long. I came into that church broken. And that was in, I started looking for a church, and I was hunting around the area. I mentioned some other fellowships that I had been part of. And I was watching a video on Facebook and this sermon came up and I was just listening to it, because I liked being in the Word, and I was like, man, I really enjoyed that. I'm like, who's this? And so I look up the pastor and they're like, oh, it's in Anna, Texas. I'm like, there's not a church in Anna that I haven't been to yet because I had been searching for a church. Well, it just so happened that was the first series that church had started. And so 3 weeks after that church started, I went for my first Sunday.
Nice.
So it was teeny tiny, such a small group of people. And I had never been part of a small church. I'd always been able to hide in a big church. But God was trying to provide me something different in this moment. And, over the course of 3 years, God really, really was working on me. And I'm talking like, I hadn't heard God's voice in so long and I had been shut off to it, but I wasn't even asking for it at this point. I was hearing it loud and clear. And about a year before I finally decided that maybe I'm going to try something different, it was every day. It was every single day. I would be on my knees crying and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And God is like telling me over and over, you can. And I'm like, I can't. I mean, we would fight about this. I was the one in church every single Sunday that was crying through worship because it was just, it was so heavy on me. I was, not only was I just buried alive in everything I was going through, but the Lord was like, I'm not going anywhere. I am as close to you now and I am not leaving. And so I like to tell people a solid 6 months, I was in torture with God. God the Word doesn't tell us that God wants to make it comfortable for us. People are like, oh, God's going to bring you through it. And they have because He is. But at the end of the day, God is not here to make us comfortable. No. Being in ministry is not comfortable. Preaching your message is not comfortable. And in fact, it's really uncomfortable a lot. And God put me in a really uncomfortable place for about 6 months. And I remember I was sick. I was having issues. I needed to go to the hospital once again. And, I finally said, I'm going to go. Maybe there really is something wrong with me, even though I knew what was wrong with me. And so I drove myself to the hospital. And I'm sorry for kind of going on, but this is just a really crucial part of the story. So I hope you guys can bear with me for a second. No, I went to this hospital and just so happened I didn't know the nurse that was going to be working there at the time. I had never met her in person. We were online friends, but she was the nurse there when I got there. And I gave her kind of everything that was going on. She comes back and, about 15 minutes later, she slides the door shut and she goes, hey, I'm just going to ask you a really simple question. You don't have to even answer me. You don't have to be honest. She goes, do you think COVID maybe has you drinking a little heavy? I just have lots of people coming in here saying, man, with COVID, like, I've just been drinking a lot. And I burst into tears because I was like, how is this happening? How is this happening? And in that moment, I said, I'm going to be obedient. And I used that exact word. And from that point forward, I was honest about where my drinking had taken me. I had never been honest about how much I was actually drinking with anybody. Nobody. And in that moment, I decided to be honest for the first time. And so what I did in that moment is I said, I'm done. God, I'm done. I'm going to be obedient. Tell me what to do. Tell me what the next right step to take is. And 3 days later, I found myself in a trauma facility that specifically dealt with trauma. I believe it was the place that God perfectly picked for me. But it also was people that were struggling with addiction. And so not only did God get to work on the addiction piece with me, but He also got to work in me through the trauma that I had, where my alcoholism, I believe, truly began. And so what the last year has looked like for me is that as part of this 12-step based program that I've been a part of for now 13 months, when they suggested to me, Nicole, you got to turn everything over. And going back to the beginning when we first started chatting, I knew that, but I knew that now. That there was no way I was going to be able to do any of this. There was no way that I was ever going to be able to forgive myself. There was no way that I was ever going to be able to truly get on the other side of this if I wasn't honest, if I didn't put everything in God, and I mean everything, not just God, take care of my kids, or God, please get me out of this situation, but I'm talking everything to him, I was never going to be able to do it. And I knew it. I had proven it the last 9 years of my life. And so when I got to working with another amazing woman that helped me through this journey for the past year, who I'm still working through this journey with, I did everything that they suggested. But the biggest thing that I did was I allowed God to take over. I mean, God wants to do a mighty work in all of us, but if we don't give him that opportunity, he's a gentle God.
That's right.
He really is. He's a gentleman. He doesn't force himself upon us. He's
right.
like, hey, I love you. And man, I want something so good for you. But if we don't allow him to come in and do it, he's not going to do it.
That's absolutely
He's not
right.
going to, it even talks about Satan just being in the corners, just waiting to lurk, to destroy us and devour us. And God's watching it all. And he's like, my beloved, what are you doing? And and so I truly turned everything over. And you want to know what? Things started getting good. Why? Because Nicole wasn't in the driver's seat anymore.
There you go.
But the real magic happened when I sat down with this woman and I was honest about everything. That story that I shared with you guys, that I've now been able to share to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women, she was the first person that I talked to about it. And
That's awesome.
when I was able to vocalize that and see her reaction to it, because I lived in so much fear about what you guys were going to think about me, who you were going to contact about me, but to get such grace on the other side, right? Not only from God, but from another human being.
That's right.
And I'm talking, I went through the gamut with her. She knows everything about me now. But at the end of that, once you do that work, you then have an opportunity to say, God, take all of this from me. I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to be that shell of a human being anymore. God, please remove this from me. Please remove it from me. And all those other crazy things that we just talked about, how Nicole likes to be in control of everything and try to be a perfectionist and all these other things to try and overcompensate. God, please take that from me too. Because if you're going to take that, then take it all.
Take it all.
And when I tell you guys, that burning bush moment, that bright light white experience, and so I felt it in that moment, like I physically felt lighter. That's when that happened for me. And so when that happened, I was just set forth in a path that I always knew was going to be there for me, when I made the decision to allow that to happen. And so, what it's looked like ever since that's happened is, I have been able to go through some really challenging things. A lot of people, when they're deep in addiction, they like to think, yet myself included, I was like, man, once I stop drinking, life's going to be good, right? Because alcohol is the reason my life was so crazy. Reflecting back on how I was in the beginning, like life was great. So if I just stop drinking, life's going to be great. And you know what? After that many years of putting people all around me through pure torture and hell, there's a lot of ramifications that come from that. There were a lot of relationships that had to be repaired. And, saying I'm sorry for the last 9 years just doesn't cut it. When you tell people that, guys, look, I'm different now. God has changed me, without coming off as some like evangelist, I really had to change.
Right.
It couldn't be lip service at this point. And I knew that because I had tried to do it that way before. And so I put everything into what I was doing, because if anything, if I couldn't repair the relationship through my words, I was going to do it through my actions. I was going to be a woman of integrity. I was going to be a woman that was going to do things that I actually said I was going to do. If I made a commitment, I was going to do it. If I said I wasn't going to do something, I wouldn't do it, and I just didn't hide anything. For me, addiction put me in isolation, and more than just physical isolation. I lied to everything and everybody. Nobody knew what was really going on with me in any any front. You know, I would say, oh, I'm going to the grocery store, but I'd be gone for 2 hours at the bar, you know, like even lying down to the little things like that. And so what that's looked like is, you know, as a ramification of that, I've had to play a lot of cleanup work. And I say but it's not, it's God, because I wouldn't be playing any sort of cleanup work without him. And it's been really hard. And, you know, it's beautiful that, you know, his grace renews every single day, because there's days when I try to take my will back from God, right? Like we have this bright light moment. We're like, man, God, take all this from me. But then something happens. Maybe something happens at work or, you know, at home, and you're like trying to take it back, and you're like, oh, I got to figure this out. Hold on a second. Nicole, you do remember what happened when you did that, right? So, you know, and there are times when I have to stop myself, or God has to put something in my path to make me stop that. But I'm able to recognize it a lot more now, you know, when I've had some really tough decisions come up, some decisions that I've been deep in prayer about. And, you know, before I would go and drink about it because I wouldn't want to deal with it. You know, I'm actually facing my problems head on rather than going into a corner by myself and drinking and just pretending it doesn't exist. And so, you know, for me, that has been a lot of growth as well. And, you know, I wish I could say that the last year has been easy, because it's not. Not only has this whole entire journey just been a lot, I mean, a lot on every single front, emotionally, physically, spiritually, just everything. But I've been going through some really hard life things and some real hard truths about myself that I've had to realize, you know, things that I maybe thought I was one way, but I'm actually not that way. You know, I felt I was just this giving person all the time. And, you know, look at me, how nice I am, and look at everything I do for you. But in reality, I wasn't doing it to be nice. I was doing it so that you would recognize how nice I was. And you would tell me, right? You would tell me how nice I was. And so some really hard truths about myself that I've had to take to God as well. You know, but if I compare the last year with God to another year without God, man, you can't even compare them. You can't even compare them. And so in that regard, life has just been great. It's been absolutely amazing. Freedom does exist if you're willing to allow it to exist.
That's right.
You know, if you allow God to do a mighty work in you, he will do a mighty work in you. I mean, he wants nothing more than that. And I have no idea what's planned for me, right? Like when none of us do. I used to dream about where I thought my plan was, or what I thought, you know, this is my God-given talent, or, you know, whatever. But now my only job right now is to follow Christ and to put one foot in front of the other and just see what happens, because my purpose here is to do whatever he wants me to do. Amen. And I stand on that, and I look forward to what's to come. So I really appreciate your time today.
Wow. Thank you for joining us. You know, you said something that's really key, and it's not easy. You know, recovery isn't easy. Life isn't easy. And there's a cliche that states, nothing worth keeping is gonna come easy, and sobriety is definitely worth keeping. Yeah. And you know, you've handled whatever adversity in this prior year very well, because you haven't drank behind whatever adversity you've been facing, and God is always with you. Yeah. And when you continue to see yourself how He sees you and how He loves you, how He knows the plans He has for you, and you always remember that, because God loves you, Jesus loves you, and He have a plan for your life, for your future. So
yeah, I like to tell people, you know, sometimes they're like, how do you talk about things like that? And you want to know why? It's because I know who my identity is in now. I know what defines me. I know who defines me. That doesn't define me anymore. I allowed it to define me for far too long, and I am not going back to that place, because that is not what defined me. Guilt and shame and trauma and abuse does not define me anymore.
That's right.
I am a daughter of the Most High God.
Of the Most High God. Well, thanks again for joining us. Thanks for tuning in to Our Story, His Glory. If you guys feel the need to want to donate to our cause, you can always visit us on freshstartcsl.com website. Click the little donate button. You guys have a blessed week. We love you. See you next week.
I have searched many years on end. There was none that my soul